morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here today. My dear friend Mr. Chocko has been inviting me for some years, and something would happen every year that I couldn't come. So I'm really honored to be here, and I'm taken aback by the the amazement at how much has been built here in Salem over the last few years. I think you're all very lucky to be at an institution such as this. Your professors asked me to talk about life-work balance. And after coming here, I was wondering if this was a relevant topic, because it seems like in a campus like this, you all probably already have life-work balance. But having said that, I think it's an issue that's a burning issue for women of today. So I brought a little PowerPoint, and I thought I would take you through a little bit of my own life, where I went from having no life-work balance to having life-work balance. So you can see that this is the adventures and the quest of life-work balance. Next slide, please. So I essentially am a doctor. I'm a cardiologist for children. And in Konkani, my husband is Konkani, they call me a hudhudi jeev. So a hudhudi jeev is one who essentially is like this, constantly in motion, constantly wanting to do different things. So when I was training in cardiology at Yale University, I basically would work 18-20 hours a day, and my mother came from India to visit me. And she looks at me and she says, listen, I may be your mother and I may want grandchildren, but I really don't think you should have any children. So I was like, why? She's like, you're just going to destroy these children, because if you're working 16, 18 hours a day and I'm sitting in India and I'm not coming here to look after those grandkids, there's really no point you having children. So this was 1990s. 95, 96, I finished training in the US, came back to India. I joined a local heart hospital in Bangalore, and it was essentially more of the same. It was 16-hour days, continuously at the hospital. By this time, I did have 2 children. I didn't take her advice. And I'll take you from then, which was 1999, to now, which is 10 years. My daughter is now 14, my son is 11, where, yes, I'm a doctor. I go to the hospital, I see patients. I helped set up actually 3 companies now, all in healthcare, telemedicine, a clinic, and the healthcare technology company. I write, I just finished a parenting book. I do e-teaching. I write for Femina and Good Housekeeping. So I have a multifaceted life, and knock on wood, those kids have turned out okay. So this is really the adventures over the years, and how do you go from having no balance to creating balance. Next slide, please. Now, my first job in India was in a heart hospital, which all the other cardiologists were men. Let me tell you, that's not an easy, it's kind of nice actually talking to a majority of women, because for them this concept of life-work balance doesn't make any sense. So we would start work in the morning, then we'd be done with our cases and clinic and most of the things by around 5:30. But between 5:30 to 7:30, they had their coffee time. So they would sit having coffee, reading Times of India, and then they would start evening rounds after 7:30 in the evening. And those evening rounds went on till 9:30. So I walk into this environment, I'm a woman with 2 little kids, and I'm expected to be there till 9:30 at night. Not necessarily because I'm saving a life at 9 in the evening, but because that was the culture. And I think in many parts of the world, it's still very much, in many workplaces, is a dominant male culture where getting home at 5 o'clock is considered, it's not considered macho, let's put it that way. So I was in the cath lab there doing procedures, and the cath lab is a very male environment. You're ballooning valves, it's a lot of adrenaline, a lot of stress. So the whole environment was very much high stress, long hours. And in this environment, I learned to survive. I finally told the head of the department, I will round by 6 o'clock, I will give you my list of patients, and then I need to go home because I have 2 small kids. So he looked at me like I had, 2 horns sticking out of my head. Like this woman with this strange concept coming to me and saying that she had to, get home at a reasonable time. But I think what I learned from there, next slide, is that as a woman, I had to stick to my guns. I don't know if that makes sense, but you've got to figure out how you can do it do it well and yet combine it with the home. And so there were a lot of learnings for me in that first job. I was bottom of the ladder. I had come back from the US, but I was clinical assistant grade 1. In India, you have grade 1, grade 2, assistant professor 2. It goes on and on, 7 steps till you can become head of department. But I learned that I had to work, I had to prove myself, and also set my limits to what I could do. Next, please. Now, I moved from there, and I was fortunate in that a few years, the person I was working for was building another hospital. And they said, will you come? I said, I'll come, but I'm not reporting to the men. I don't want to report to adult cardiology. I get to run my own department and set my own rules. So they were like, okay. So I get there, but it's the same. And you will find you can move from one institution to another, and ultimately the problems are very similar. So it was a 16-hour workday. I had no help. There was no other pediatric cardiologist. And at this point now, these kids are growing, and my mother's predictions are coming true. That, you really shouldn't have done this. Next slide, please. So one day, I think when my daughter became around 6.5, 7, and that's the age they start talking to you. Now, you guys are still young. You haven't reached the stage of, children telling you that you're working too hard. But my daughter was about 7, and she tells me, she says, why are the children at the hospital more important than me? And that, as a parent, is a very difficult question to answer. And this made me think and introspect. And I must say, in life, I have learned that many times we don't listen to what people tell us. They say it to us, but we're not hearing it. But I listened. And I went back to the head of the hospital, and I said, I really cannot do this. You need to hire somebody else, or I'm quitting. So you come to a crossroad in life sometimes where you actually just say, I'm leaving, or else. Sometimes it works. I think we have to work ourselves into a situation where we can say that. And they were like, no, fine, you do whatever you want. I said, I want Wednesdays, half days, and Saturdays, half days. I mean, this for a doctor was a huge deal. And I would go home on Wednesday afternoon, make sure to pick the kids up at the bus stop. And I asked my daughter a year later, how do you feel now? And she said, earlier, when I used to come home, there was darkness. Now when I come home, there is light. And I think for me, that was the beginning really of this whole life-work balance that we read about in books, but actually putting it into practice. So I will give you some tips, next slide please, on what are the things you can do to actually achieve life-work balance. Now, why do you have to get life balance in the first place? Medically speaking, there are a couple of reasons. Next please. So one of the issues is that if you have too much stress, right, you age early, you have coronary artery disease early, your blood pressure goes up. And so one of the things that one can do is looking at nature. I think you're quite lucky here in Salem at Sona. You're surrounded by trees everywhere. So even medically speaking, 10 minutes of looking out at the sky, at the birds, at the trees is very calming. This is something you can institute in today's life, so it takes you forward as you get older. Listening to music, green tea, lots of laughter. You can see I'm always doing this. So I think bringing laughter into our lives, I find in India, in most institutions, in most workplaces, it's very serious. Laughter is considered, you're not serious. But I think laughter is really essential. In our own company that we have set up, we have a masseuse who goes around giving 20-25 neck massages a day, and now I next want to bring in a joker who goes around cracking jokes. But I think laughter is really one way to reduce stress. Next please. The other ways that one can really, medically speaking, what is sleep. There are a lot of studies that have shown that if you don't get 7 to 8 hours of sleep a day, your blood pressure actually goes up. So recommendation for all you students who are up there studying till 1, 2 in the morning, make sure you get that 7 hours of sleep. It does a lot to keep your blood pressure low, your stress low, and then you can think about balance in life. The third is doing something new every day. It could be, buying some bananas and giving it to a little child on the roadside. It could be calling up your mother who you haven't seen since you've been in hostel for a while. It could be anything that you're not doing on a daily basis, just breaking the routine a little bit. Next, please. So I think exercise is something when we're young, and frankly, when I was young, I didn't think about exercise. You play basketball or badminton because you're on the college team, and the minute college is over, it's all forgotten. But 30 minutes of exercise 4 times a week is good for the heart and good for the long term. In fact, there's a new study that's just come out showing that they took two mice and made one mice exercise every day and one mice not exercise. And the mouse who exercised every day, grey hair was delayed and all the aging was delayed. So I think making that a part of one's routine from a medical standpoint really helps in terms of when we're 80 and looking as good as Kulkarni madam today, who's 82 and looking like she's in her 60s. So I think exercise is really key. Next, please. Now, what about non-medically speaking? What are the things next that we can do? And if you think about life-work balance, why do we need it? We need it because, and what is life-work balance? Life-work balance is essentially being able to work and to live without grey hairs, while you make space for friends and family and space for oneself. I think, next slide please. In India, a lot of times making space for oneself is looked at negatively. That you're selfish if you're trying to make a little time for oneself. But I think life-work balance is really learning that in life we need all of that. We need to work, we need to enjoy life, we need to have our families and our friends, and we need a little bit of time somewhere in there for ourselves. Next slide, please. Now, if you ask about the work part, and this is something I think women face, this is something I faced. I reached a point where I was willing to give up 10, 15 years of training to be a super specialist pediatric cardiologist, to give it up for 2 children, right? And these are choices we sometimes reach. These are those divisions in the road. But if you think about a career, why a career? And I think the key question is that you can't ask why. You can't ask yourself, why do I need to work? We need to accept it as something that we as women want to do. Like a man never asks himself why he has to have a job. He just has to have a job. He just needs to work. And it's the same with a woman in a career. There's no question of why. It's a question of how one can do it with balancing everything else. Why a family? Does it mean because we work, we can't have a family? Does it mean that they're mutually exclusive? And the answer is no. We all need family. We all need a little bit of tender, loving care. We need to be able to go home to something. So we need both these elements in our female life, as do men in their male existence. So it's really similar, I think, for human beings all over the world. So having asked that, when you decide, yes, I do need a career, next slide, please. What is it in a career? What is it about work that one does? Is it a 9-to-5 thing that you go there, do your work, get your paycheck and come home? And I think essentially when we talk about balance, we talk about work not being work, but work being something that we enjoy doing. So is it a necessary evil, or is it something we enjoy? And I think if you all students of Sona can go out there and find what it is that drives you and finds what it is that you're passionate about, you would have found the first part of life-work balance. And the first part is passion. And now I'm in an interesting position of being a doctor, but I also run a company, so we have about... But it's okay not to, if you carry with you that energy and passion. And I think once you have that energy, and we talk about, I don't know if you all have heard about positive energies and negative energies, but this is positive energy. This is what? Negative energy. So we could bring both energies into the world, and you will find that positive energy people are like magnets. They get other positive energy people around them. So I think this is one thing, if you take out of your education the fact that it's great to work and be able to work hard and to also bring with it energy and passion, you have achieved life-work balance before you've even begun. Next slide. Now we talked about family. You want to combine that. So I'll give you some tips as when you get married and you have those kids and you have grandparents or you have parents who have their own demands of you and expectations of you. Next slide, please. And some of the tips are the to-do list. Do you all do a to-do list? have to do engineering computer class in morning, finish homework that professor gave, right? We all have to-do lists. But I think learning to have decide the night before what you're going to do the next day, it leads to efficiency. If you know you have 1 hour of homework, then you're going to plan that 1 hour, right, in student life. And it's the same for adult life. If we plan the night before, have to have that meeting, have to interview that candidate, have to write that article, have to prepare for the talk in Salem, we will get that done. So I think an efficient to-do list is, and giving yourself goals. I will finish this week, I'll finish this quarter, I'll finish this year. It makes one efficient and we can achieve a lot in a shorter duration. Next slide, please. The other thing is technology. I think you're quite lucky here. I see that there is a lot of use of technology on the campus. And technology is truly going to change the way we live and the way we work. And it already is. For instance, thanks to Mr. Arun from Cisco, I'm able to use technology to deliver lectures to cardiology fellows all across India and in Africa. And recently, the fellows in Thailand have logged on. So what is happening essentially? Sitting in Bangalore, we're able to teach students all over the world. Now, it could be that technology will change everything you do and the way you do it. But it's important not to make it our slave. Technology, not to make us its slave. Technology is our slave, not the reverse. And you see the BlackBerry generation, right? Everyone's on their BlackBerry, no time to talk, no time to go out. So I think it's important to use technology, but also limit its use. So have balance with both. Next slide, please. And I told you about my daughter, right? About saying, why are the children at the hospital more important than me? Never forget that one. And it can be your daughter, it can be your mother. You will find as you get busy, your parents will say, you don't have time for me. Your friends will say, you don't have time for me. Your husband will say, you don't have time for me. But I think figuring that out, how to make time for the family and work, some of the things, you can work part-time, maybe you can work from home, maybe you can bring your kids to work, maybe you can take your mother on the conference, but figuring out how to combine it all. Next, one of the things that I do is, if I go for a medical conference on a Saturday, Sunday, take the kids, talk in Chitradurga, go to Chitradurga Fort. So combine kind of work activities along with family. And don't forget to say, I love you. I know it's not an Indian thing, but we don't say it often enough. To actually show that we care, to make that time to pick up the phone. And we perhaps used to, but I think with life becoming so fast and busy, sometimes we forget to. So I think reminding ourselves of those little things that we need to spend the time. Next, please. Other little tips would be essentially on not forgetting friends. As you get older, you will find your school friends get dispersed. Of course, there's Facebook and Twitter and so on. But I have this philosophy with this one thing I tell them, late but there. Which means I'm not going to be there on time for your event, but I will be there. So making sure we're there for others who mean something to us as life goes on. So I think these are some of the tips. I will end now with what I think is really makes it all worthwhile, and that is doing good. This was a slide actually put in there for the men, but I don't think they're here. Most of your college students aren't here. But why is the toucan relevant to human beings? Anyone has the answer on that? Just keep the slide up. Why is the toucan, the bird from South America, relevant? So it's relevant because both parents actually look after the kid. So unlike perhaps in the human species, in the toucan, both the male and female are equal partners in bringing up their children. So if you can, find a man who believes in the toucan concept. Next slide, please. Next. Next. And so I will end one with getting help, and the next is with doing things. I think as you get older, it's important to get some help, but remember that they need life-work balance too. So treat all those below you and working for you with respect as you get older and are in positions above them as time goes on. Next. And finally, doing good. I think we don't put this enough on page 3. If you read Times of India, page 3, it's about Katrina Kaif and Shah Rukh Khan and, Sachin's next son, and which is all good stuff. But how exciting or interesting is it to read about the good things that are being done? One of the things that has fascinated for me for years about your institution here is the story Mr. Choco told me about the ladies growing mushrooms in their huts in Salem. And it seems like a small thing, but once they had the skill, they were able to use that. So from the polytechnic, from the colleges, whatever activity you do in the community is doing good. And I think ultimately that's what makes life complete. Next slide. I have some personal passions. One of it is playgrounds. If you think about our country, how many children grow up without having a playground? In Bangalore, you can go to Cubbon Park, but if you live in Whitefield, you're not going to go to Cubbon Park every day. So this is one of my personal passions, is putting up playgrounds in government schools where poor children can access them. So we're on to our 55th playground right now. And I'll end with another passion of mine. Next slide, please. Why I believe I became a part entrepreneur and a part doctor. I would have been very happy treating patients my whole life, and that is doing good. But I was given this opportunity to create a healthcare company. And I always believe that there has to be a greater reason, that someone above there had a reason for doing this. Next slide, please. And the reason is this. We have 1 billion people in our country, right? How do most people in India get a diagnosis? They get on a train, they go to the nearest city center, they take all their scans, or they take themselves, they see a doctor, they get the testing done again, and they get a diagnosis. If they don't have the right diagnosis, they can't get the right treatment. So if someone doesn't diagnose that you have a tumor, they're not going to tell you you need that tumor taken out. So the right diagnosis is the first thing you need in a treatment plan to getting the right treatment. And that is one of the biggest issues in our country, is getting the right diagnosis. And you will find patients go from remote corners of West Bengal to a hospital in Delhi or Bangalore or CMC Vellore just to get a diagnosis. And so we set up what is called the Telerad Foundation, where essentially hospitals in remote parts of India can send their scans to our center in Bangalore and get an opinion, get a diagnosis, and get put on a treatment plan. Next, please. Next slide, please. So, for instance, this is a hospital this is the Ramakrishna Mission Hospital, which is in Itanagar in Arunachal Pradesh. And they are the only CT scanner for the whole state of Arunachal Pradesh. And they didn't have a radiologist, they didn't have a doctor who could interpret it. So we hooked up with them in 2007, and we've reported for over 6,000 patients. And now that scanner, instead of doing 1 scan a day, is running 24 hours because they can get the right diagnosis, and the Prime Minister's office just gave them an MRI. So I think in any sphere, wherever we work, trying to also figure out how we can use our own domain, our own knowledge, and use it for social good in any which way we can. That will ultimately, no matter what else is going on in life, that is what will give you the balance. Thank you very much, ladies.